On April 26, 2024, at 3:30 p.m. Central Daylight Time, a large and violent tornado would touch down near Waterloo, Nebraska. Over the next 61 minutes, the tornado would reach winds of over 170 miles per hour, inflict EF4 damage, injure 4, cause $8 million in property damage. Although, by some miracle, despite the tornado tracking through densely populated suburbs of the western Omaha metro, no fatalities would occur. In this video, I will be analyzing the environment leading up to the tornado as it happened, including how it was warned, and finally the recovery efforts in western Omaha, particularly the Elkhorn community. On April 25, 2024, the Storm Prediction Center would upgrade to a level 3 out of 5 enhanced risk of severe weather on the Day 2 outlook for April 26, 2024. This enhanced risk would include portions of northeast Kansas, northwest Missouri, western Iowa, and eastern Nebraska. This was driven by a 10% hatch tornado risk for strong to violent tornadoes within the hatch risk area, with a slight risk for damaging winds stretching from northeast Texas through eastern Nebraska and central Iowa, and then also a 30% hatch large hail risk stretching down into northern Texas through the Nebraska-Iowa border. The Prediction Center would issue a much larger enhanced risk stretching from western Iowa and eastern Nebraska all the way down through central Texas. This was mainly driven by a 10% hatch tornado risk for strong to intense tornadoes within the hatched risk area, which you could see highlighted in the yellow with the black dashes going through it. This was also accompanied by a 50% damaging wind risk, nothing too intense in particular, so that's why this did not go enhanced. But if you look at the large hail graphic, this is the other factor that was driving the enhanced risk, and that stretched once again from northeast Nebraska and northwest Iowa all the way down through central Texas for dangerously large hail within 2 inches of diameter within 25 miles of any given point in that 30% hatched risk area. At a sounding which was valid through April 26th at the 21Z, which in Central Daylight Time does equate to 4 p.m., but it was taken a couple hours before the tornado. That is just the time it was valid until. But you can see Elkhorn's over here. For some reason, the label isn't popping up, and the Epley Airfield is over here. The sounding was taken at the Epley Airfield, so that's just about 25 miles or a 33-minute drive without traffic away. You can see on the blue lines. So that is where the sounding is taken, and this is where the tornado occurred. So pretty similar environment, but I do want to let you all know that it is not exact. That's just the closest area where I could find a sounding for, or my friends could help me with. This sounding at the Omaha Epley Airfield, just about 25 miles east of Elkhorn. Now keep in mind, there was about 500 more mixed layer and about 700 more surface-based cape in Elkhorn than at the airfield, but even then, 1,500 to 1,800 is still enough for thunderstorm and tornadic development. And I think one thing that really supported these storms is if you look in the first kilometer of the atmosphere, we had 278 SRH. Now, that's not unseen. We've seen stuff like that before, but even in the first half kilometer of the atmosphere, we had 194. So just really low down there. The storms were already going to be really capable of just rotating, and they were going to have no issue with that. With the first 3 kilometers of the atmosphere, that one is not the craziest thing we've seen, 349, but it certainly did support that thunderstorm development. Relative helicity or SRH values, those storms are going to certainly have no issue getting started to rotate. And in terms of bulk share, you can see in the first half kilometer of the atmosphere, 18 knots, which is really good for the first, half of a kilometer, and 27 knots is a little bit low for the first kilometer, but 44 in the first 0 to 3 kilometers of the atmosphere is definitely what did support that development. Again, this was a bit further east of where the tornado occurred, so these values were all a little bit higher out there. That's why that area was still included in that 10% hatch tornado risk. But obviously these thunderstorms did move northeast relatively quickly. So that is what we were taking a look at in terms of this sounding. I do want to go over 3 cape. We had 123 3 cape for surface based and 85 for mixed layer. That is a little bit low for mixed layer, but for surface base, that is more than enough for that tornadic development in those thunderstorms. So these storms certainly could rotate very easily. It would not take much for a tornado to touch down, so it was very evident that this was going to be a dangerous day for any storms that did move through the area, and that would be proven just hours later in Elkhorn. Radar imagery. So this is at 3:40 p.m. Central Daylight Time. You could see we had a tornado emergency. So this is tornado emergency for West Elkhorn, for northwestern Sarpy, western Douglas, and east central Saunders counties. So that was issued at 3:37 p.m., just 3 minutes earlier. You could see those deep velocity signatures, very dangerous. And this was also present on reflectivity, so let me get that pulled up for you all. You could see that debris ball in there. But I want to go over how this rotation develops. So I believe we are on 20 frames right now. So watch down right over here. You could see it developed there near Memphis, Nebraska, and it really wrapped up over here just to the southwest of Elkhorn, and that is when it moved through, and this is right around when it was inflicting mid-range EF3 damage. So if we go just about 5 minutes further ahead, let me do that really quick. So you can see with this, now the velocities, excuse me, they were in Elkhorn, and there was moving through the radar area, so very close to the radar, within 5 miles. So this is when it was inflicting that EF4 damage in a suburb just to the west of Elkhorn. If you look at correlation coefficient, give it just a second to load here. There is a lot of contamination just because of how close we are to the radar, but you can see right behind those velocities is where that debris was. Highest level of weather warning, and in the previous segment you just saw the first one issued for this tornado, a much smaller one. This second one was another tornado emergency. It is rare for a tornado to even get one tornado emergency. We only see less than 10 tornado emergencies issued in a year, and the fact that this one had 2 just shows how long track it was. Again, it was on the ground for 61 minutes, so this is just as it moved through Elkhorn, and those are some of the most impressive velocities we've seen close to the radar in recent years. So this was a violent tornado. So if we do go over this tornado emergency, this was until 4:30 p.m. Central Daylight Time. It says 3:30 because I'm in a different time zone, but tornado emergency for western Elkhorn and Bennington. This is a particularly dangerous situation. Take cover now. Emergency management confirmed tornado. So this is the highest level of weather warning. To repeat, a large, extremely dangerous, and potentially deadly tornado is on the ground. To protect your life, take cover now. So extremely rare and dangerous situation. The National Weather Service only uses tornado emergencies in the most dire of situations where they pretty much have to, and this was definitely a great use case for it, and I think it was certainly warranted, as we would see later when they did the damage survey. At the tornado's path using tornadoarchive.com. It's a great resource. And then after this, we are going to use Damage Assessment Toolkit. This tornado does have a survey on there, but for tornadoes that happened longer ago, like before the 2010s, a lot of those are not on Damage Assessment Toolkit. Even some in the 2010s, like for example Joplin is not on there, and a couple other ones like Parkersburg, Greensburg. So Tornado Archive has all of those, so this is a great tool for what you can't find on Damage Assessment Toolkit. This does not have the individual damage indicators, but you can see they have colored overlays for what damage was being inflicted in what areas. So this touched down to the southeast of Venice, Nebraska, and inflicted EF0 damage, but it would quickly strengthen to EF2 strength near Pacific Street. Then it would cross West Dodge Road at weak EF1 intensity near Junkstock, Nebraska, and then this would continue across Blondo and West Maple Road. This is where it would start to inflict EF4 damage. This was when the tornado was at its strongest point just to the west of Elkhorn, so this is why it is called the Elkhorn EF4. So it crossed over West Maple Road, and then it looks like in this subdivision inflicted some EF4 damage near Elkhorn Prospect Hill Cemetery, and then would continue for EF3 damage. Keep in mind, this tornado was initially rated EF3 just days after it occurred in April 2024, but then in July 2024, the National Weather Service in Valley/Omaha, Nebraska would resurvey the damage and reconsider, and it would be upgraded to an EF4 at 170 miles per hour. The tornado would continue to track before roping out to the northeast of Blair, Nebraska, which would actually occur, the rope out would occur in Iowa, south of Modale, Iowa, so that would cross the Missouri River into Iowa when it was around EF1 to EF0 intensity, so very weak at that point, but certainly a tornado nonetheless. National Weather Service Damage Assessment Toolkit. This is where you can find damage surveys for many tornadoes. You can see when it initially touched down, we had a couple EF0 damage indicators, some EF1, and then over here we saw our first EF2 near Grover Street. So you can see large sections of roof structure removed, most walls remain standing, so that's a mid-range EF2 rating. If we take a look at the image for this, there is the image for this damage indicator. So once again, 122 miles an hour is what that was rated by the National Weather Service. I will say they did a great job with this survey. So then the tornado tracked over West Dodge Road, got EF1 right here, EF1 110, and then this is where the damage got intense. Near the Prospect Hill Cemetery, you can see we have EF4 170 damage indicator. So a home was destroyed, above grade debris shows some piling on foundation, but substantial portion of floor swept clean. Nearby trees snapped with some debarking. High resolution overhead imagery showed a subvortex may have made direct impact on that location. So that is why that one was rated so much higher. And then you can see a cluster of EF3s on all these homes, a 155, so that is towards the higher end of the EF3 damage ratings. It looks like the top level of this house is just gone. And then the garage is still standing. That's the same image twice. So we'll just take a look at a couple of these. I think a lot of these are very similar type houses, so it looks like we have garages down here, second levels up here, so you can see a lot of stuff collapsed. The concrete wall is still standing there, so that earned this one a 145 rating. It looks like the ones on the west side of this road over here are more intense damage. Yeah, you can see more of the concrete walls gone. And then we have some people here, looks like doing some cleanup. You can see some tree debarking up there. Looks like we got some stuff hung in the tree, like some sheet metal, maybe some clothing. So that one was EF3 155. And if we keep going to the north here, you can see we had two more EF4 damage indicators. This one 167, so very low end, but pretty much everything on this house is gone other than what looks to be like a closet or some type of water unit. And then the steps are still there, obviously, with the cars, which you can see were in the garage, but the garage is gone and the cars look pretty totaled, which is very unfortunate. But the great thing about this tornado, even though it did lots of damage, it caused no fatalities and only 4 injuries, which is a very low amount for the populous area it tracked through. You could see here another intensely damaged home. It looks like we had a garage over here based off the bike and stuff. So steps still, those look like the steps that would be inside the garage. So everything's pretty much gone in terms of it's not standing anymore, but you can still see the debris. It's not completely swept away. So, and these were mainly pretty new houses and very well-built homes. Looks like we've got some more EF3 over here, lower end EF3. Yeah, so concrete wall still standing, but definitely the front of the house is pretty damaged. So obviously a very violent tornado. It was initially rated EF3, I believe around 160 or 165, but once again, 2 or 3 months later, they went ahead and upgraded that rating. So here's another EF3 DI much further north near County Road 40 and 31. That looks like a structure and some trees damaged or debarked. And then another EF4 damage indicator over here. We haven't quite crossed into Iowa just yet, so looks like we got 2 EF4s over here near Sundown Drive. Yeah, so this is another EF4 170. Yeah, that house is just the basement down there, and then you can see that concrete slab pretty destroyed. There's really not much left with this home. It looks like it collapsed down there. Let's see some other damage points. Yep, there's another angle of that. You can see people helping out with the cleanup. This tornado had a lot of response from the public, so that was, of course, good to see. Let's try to get up here to this second damage indicator, which was also EF4. Another house. Yep, so the first level, still some concrete standing, but it looks like the front part of the house did collapse onto the basement. Thankfully, no fatalities or serious injuries occurred. So now the tornado's path is about to cross into Iowa, and this is when it significantly weakens. So it crosses the Missouri River and then does some EF0 damage into Iowa on Highway 30. So this is 80 miles an hour, large branches broken. Some EF1 over here on 295th Street for 90, and you can see that we have some trees down, looks like in like a little ditch, maybe a river, and then the tornado would lift. So the tornado was very long tracked. It was on the ground for over 61 minutes. Let's try to see like the overview from the survey really quick. Alright, so you can see the width of the tornado was 1,900. I believe that's measured in yards. Max winds 170. Start location was 4120, and then yeah, that's the longitude, negative 96.33, and then negative 96.01 was the end. So that's 32.49 miles, and that tracked from West Omaha all the way through to the northwest of Missouri Valley, Iowa, or to the south of Modale. So a very violent tornado. Some footage. We're going to start off with Leo77 on YouTube's video of the tornado that was uploaded on the day of. Obviously, credit to them. The link to all videos that I use will be in the description. If I use your footage in the video and you would like it taken down, please feel free to leave me a comment and I will do so. We're going to have a look at this footage. This is right when it was tracking through Elkhorn at its peak intensity with multiple damage indicators, with 170 mile per hour winds inflicted. So I'm going to play the video and mute. So it is only 11 seconds, so it's going to be short, but here we go. Of how loud it was, with obviously the sirens and the winds. But if we go back a little bit, I have this on 0.25 speed. You can see that maybe some debris from the tornado, I'm not sure. You could also see there were many power flashes over there. So obviously it was hitting a populated area with some power lines going through. I have been there before where the tornado was, and it is certainly a densely populated area with many commercial buildings. So it's a miracle that everyone was alright. So that's the first piece of footage we're going to take a look at. Loaded to YouTube by Tom Adams, so credit to him. That will also be in the description of the video. We're not going to watch through it just because it is 16 minutes long. But you can see at the start, clearly this is when the tornado was touching down. I have looked on maps and everything and done my research on this footage. So this is when the tornado was initially touching down. And then you can see there were violent vortices with this tornado, very violent motion, multiple vortices, and thankfully looks like the person taking the video did go inside because they saw the imminent danger heading towards them. So then it switches over to CCTV footage. You could see debris being thrown all over. So trees, you can see the motion in the trees. Thankfully this house was not too heavily damaged, but you can see that windmill go down. So certainly some very strong winds here, probably at least 110 miles an hour. It looked a bit more intense over there at that building. You can see a roof ripped off. I think that was EF2 damage. So that is the next piece of footage. It looks like garage door got bent in. So that is the second piece of footage we're going to look at, and the final one for this video. Alright everyone, that is going to be the end of this video on the Elkhorn, Nebraska EF4 Tornado from April 26, 2024. If you did enjoy, please be sure to like the video, and I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel. And that is all for this video. If you have any feedback, please be sure to leave it in the comments below, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Peace.